Welcome to the Library of Congress. Is someone here returning to the library? Have you visited before? Nice, welcome back. And who's here for the first time? Welcome. Well, everyone is always welcome at the library. This is America's library, and this is a library that values America's creativity. So we have everything you care about: comics, newspapers, maps, old books, new books, video games. We have everything. We have over 179 million things, not just books, things. It's pretty incredible. And we have language, 480 languages represented. Does anyone speak a language other than English? Look at that. And we have a story today that Mr. George Takei will tell you about his childhood growing up as a Japanese American person. And the library has all kinds of stories that we keep in our collections, new stories and old stories. And today we get to create a new collection item, all of us together. We'll make a video of this conversation that Mr. George Takei will have with my friend. So let me tell you a little bit about who will be interviewing George Takei. Her name is Yukari Matsuyama, and she is a lifelong bookworm. Any bookworms in here? Nice. And it's okay if you're not a bookworm, everyone's still welcome. She has worked in an elementary school library. She's organized school fairs, school book fairs. She reads aloud to kids. She volunteers at book festivals like the library's own National Book Festival, August 24th this year. She's also the former senior catalog manager for the First Book Marketplace, which is a national literary nonprofit. Yukari currently volunteers for an open book foundation. She works closely with the board of the Children's Book Guild of Washington, D.C., and serves as the co-director of the Walter Dean Myers Awards for Outstanding Children's Literature. So she has all the cred of a book reader and a bookworm, and she's here to help us learn about an incredible story of someone who lived through a pretty tough period of history. So I'm so excited to share this story with you. Let's all give a big welcome to Yukari Matsuyama in conversation with George Takei.
Some fans already. Good morning, students. It is so nice to see you all here this morning. I am really thrilled and honored to be on the same stage as Mr. George Takei. He's an actor and a pop culture icon, but just as importantly, he is a Japanese American icon. And I think it's so special that we get to be here with him to talk about his new book, My Lost Freedom, during Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. So, already some are fans, but some of our other younger audience members may recognize your voice from recent movies and TV shows and even video games, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about the work that you're most famous for.
Well, that's Star Trek. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here this morning, or this afternoon. I've been here since this morning to talk with all of you in Washington, D.C., our national capital, and at the Library of Congress. I mean, this is a very special place for all Americans, and to be talking to all of you Washingtonians and about the time when I was about some of your age and even younger, hearing about my life from the time I was a 5-year-old kid, much younger than you guys over there. As a child, America went crazy after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. They saw people in America that looked just like the people that bombed Pearl Harbor, like us. We're Americans, just like you, but we look like this. exactly like the people that bombed Pearl Harbor. And they looked at us with suspicion and fear and outright hatred simply because we looked like this. My parents, when they were walking down the sidewalk and people drove by, they yelled at my parents, spat at them, called them spies and saboteurs. My father's business was graffitied. His car had 3 letters painted on it in red paint, J-A-P, that word of racial hate. And the government joined in on that hysteria. They came down with a curfew. All Japanese Americans had to be home by 8 p.m. and stay home until 6 a.m. That was fine with us kids, as I was a 5-year-old. But for some people, I mean, it was very inconvenient. They worked at night. But any Japanese Americans that was found on the streets at night, they were arrested and thrown into jail just for being out at night. And then when my father went to the bank to make a deposit or a withdrawal, he discovered that they had taken his money. They called it freezing your bank account. The government just drained all the money out just because we looked like this. It was a horrible time. And then on February 19th, 1942, the President of the United States, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, signed Executive Order 9066, which ordered all Japanese Americans on the West Coast to be rounded up and put in barbed wire prison camps with no charge, no trial, no due process. We have what we call a system of due process, where when you're arrested, you have a right to know why you're being arrested. And that means that they have to tell you what the charge is. And you have the right to challenge those charges in a court of law and say, no, what you're charging me is not true. I'm innocent. And then the people charging you has to come up with facts, evidence of what you did. And in our case, they had none of that. No charge, no trial, just imprisonment. It was unconstitutional. It was against our Constitution. And the soldiers came to take us away and put us in barbed wire prison camps.
It must have been a very scary time, especially for the adults, because they understood what was happening. But like you said, you were 4 or 5 years old, and they were taking you to a place that they called Camp Something Something. Did you think that it would be like a camp, that you would go and be on vacation with your family?
Well, as a matter of fact, we were confused. We didn't know. My parents were packing, and on that particular day, I had a brother a year younger. I was 5, he was 4, Henry was 4, and we had a baby sister, an infant. And he came into our bedroom and dressed us hurriedly and told us to play in the living room while he and our mother did some last-minute packing. Nothing to do in the living room, so Henry and I were standing by the front window, just gazing out at the neighborhood. Nothing happening. Then suddenly, we saw 2 soldiers marching up our driveway. They carried rifles with shiny bayonets on them. And they stomped up the porch. The window we were looking out at looked at the steps to our porch. They stomped right in front of our window. And then they started banging on the door with their fists. Henry and I were petrified. And my father came rushing out of their bedroom, opened the door, and one of the soldiers pointed the bayonet at our father. Henry and I didn't know what to do. We were frozen with fear. And the other soldier said, "Get your family out of this house." And my father said, "I need 10 more minutes, 10 minutes." And they gave it to him. He went back to the bedroom, and he came out with 2 boxes about this size, tied in twine, one for me and one for Henry to carry. And then he went back, and he got 2 heavy suitcases that he carried, and he said, "Follow me." So we followed him out, and we stood on the driveway waiting for our mother to come out. And when she came out, she had our baby sister in one arm and a huge duffel bag in the other, and tears were streaming down her cheeks. That was the first day. We had no idea what was going on. However, we were taken from there to the horse stalls of Santa Anita Racetrack. We were taken there in a bus and unloaded, herded over to the stable area, and each family was assigned a horse stall to sleep in. My father said, "This is where the horses slept," which excited Henry and me. We get to sleep where the horses slept. We were too young to understand what was going on. That was to be our temporary home. But for our mother, it was, she said, "This is so degrading, humiliating." And my baby sister promptly got sick. And then a few days later, I got sick too. And my mother, through sheer care and love and taking care of us, we recovered. And then a few months later, my father said, "We're moving again." And when I asked him, "Where are we going?" he thought for a few seconds, and he told us that we were going on a long vacation in the country, and we're going there by train. And so, again, Henry and I were excited. A vacation and a train trip to boot. We'd never been on a train before. So we didn't really understand what was going on other than what our father told us.
He was trying to make it as easy a transition for the children, but what happened was they put you on a train and took you from California to Arkansas to what the government called a war relocation camp, but it was an incarceration camp and you weren't able to leave. And so all of the Japanese Americans in the camp were there. They couldn't go anywhere. Your father played an important leadership role. He was a block manager, and he organized activities and tried to uplift people's spirits because obviously the adults were upset. They're Americans being imprisoned, and the kids didn't know what was happening. So your father played a big role. What were some of the things that he did in the camps to help your fellow Japanese Americans sort of settle in and try to make the best?
Well, what I started to understand was that we weren't going to have any freedom. There were barbed wire fences with sharp barbs on it surrounding the entire camp. Something like about 6,000 people were in our camp in the swamps of Arkansas. All the camps were in the most forbidden places in the country. We were in the sultry swamps of Arkansas. There was this jungle, I called it a jungle, big tall trees growing out of water. I'd never seen trees growing out of water. And their roots came out and twisted and went back in and out like a snake. And there was a ditch right around our block and a little stream of water, not a stream, stagnant water. But they were little black fishies swimming in it. And because they didn't move too fast, I was able to catch them like this. And Henry held the jar, and I put them in there, and we had a jar full of wiggly black fishies. But Arkansas and the swamps turned out to be a magical place. Well, every morning we got up and looked at the fishies, and they seemed to get bigger every day. And then one morning they seemed to have grown bumps on their sides. And then the next morning, legs popped out. They broke through the bumps, and they lost their tail, and they climbed up the side of my jar, and they escaped. Fishies that turn into frogs. Amazing. I'd never seen anything like that. So to us, and we couldn't go beyond the barbed wire fence. And they had towers with soldiers carrying rifle, the same kind of rifle that the soldiers that forced us out of our home carried, and staring at us. So I knew this wasn't like our neighborhood in our Los Angeles home. We couldn't go out beyond the wire fence, and the soldiers were there to give us orders. Don't come near or go over there. So it was a scary place, but an exotic place where Henry and I made all sorts of discoveries.
So there were moments of joy sometimes, and as a child, you do find those moments. And I'm sure the adults tried to help that. You had birthday parties and celebrated Christmas.
We celebrated Christmas, but this was a prison camp. They didn't allow, we ate meals in a mess hall, huge hall, and it was lousy food that was fed to us. When I was a teenager and I had many discussions with my father about camp, he said one of the dishes that was served to us when we first arrived at the Arkansas camp was what he called beef brain. I don't remember that, but my father said none of us knew how to eat that, and it smelled funny and it tasted funny. And that evening, the latrine got a lot of business.
Yeah, it was a communal living, like you ate together and you slept in really cramped quarters.
And the cooks were internees, the fellow prisoners in camp. They brought the food, and it was wartime, so we got the worst of what was left over.
So despite all of these really harsh living conditions, you have a story about finding a new furry friend at one of the camps. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, Henry and I were roaming around exploring and experiencing this strange new world. And one afternoon, after our lunch, we went behind the kitchen of the mess hall, where they had all these crates that brought in the vegetables and other food stuff. And there was a black scruffy dog sniffing around, and he was wagging his tail. He was very friendly, and so we made friends with him, but he seemed very hungry. So we knew one of the cooks in the mess hall, Mr. Kikutani, and we took the doggy with us and brought Mr. Kikutani out and introduced the two of them and said, this dog is hungry. Can you give us something to feed to him? And he said, I've got 100 people to feed. I can't be feeding the dog. And I said, but please, he's hungry, more hungry than us. You can give him our dinner. And so he said, well, maybe a piece of weenie that they're going to be preparing for weenie teriyaki that night. And he gave us that, and the dog just popped it into his mouth and swallowed it. And we knew he was very hungry. So we went back to our unit in the barrack, and my mother had a tin of cookies that she saved over a long period of time, stale cookies, but we thought we'd give him a piece of that, and went to beg my mother, but she said, no, these are for you. But she finally broke down and gave us a little crack from one of the cookies and feed it to him. And he needed a name, so since he was black and shaggy, we called him Blackie, and he became our friend and our escort to school when we went to school. And he sat there and waited all morning long until we were dismissed and escorted us back home again. And we began our begging routine in the behind the kitchen of the mess hall.
So another scene from your book, My Lost Freedom, is that you lived near the mess hall, which also showed movies sometimes. Do you think watching the movies then sparked an interest or love for acting and theater for your future career?
Well, the movies were a lot of fun. They were like every other month, special treats that the government allowed. And they were all very old films, black and white, mostly Hollywood films, but occasionally they had old samurai films from Japan that were imported before the war. And one thing I found absolutely fascinating was when they showed these Japanese samurai films, they seemed to not have a soundtrack, but instead there was a man who came with the film. Say there's a big screen behind us here. It was a white tarp in camp. Near the bottom on the left-hand side, he set up a little table with sound effect implements, empty coconut shells, steel triangle, and a pipe to make sounds, and pipes that he banged on each other for when the sword fighting sequences began. And it was fascinating because he had a book in front of him, but he had all the lines of the story memorized. And sometimes he even spoke in unison with the actors' lip movement, synchronizing with the lip movement of the actors. And that was the most incredible thing. I was interested in him making the sound effects and doing the dialogue more than watching the screen. I was watching him over there. He had played all the parts, the shogun, the lord, and giving an order to his samurai, and he had his princess sitting next to him, and the lord in anger would say, and the samurai would say, "Ha, so de gozaimasu." And the princess would go, "Ma, osoroshii koto." All those voices coming from one man. Absolutely fascinating. I was watching him more than the movie itself. And I thought he was a magician to be able to change his voice like that. People think that that's where my acting interest started, but no, I was more fascinated by the magic that he was performing with his vocal cords. And the idea of becoming an actor was far from just the interest was implanted in me.
And you're carrying on. That was very impressive, your voice acting just now.
Well, you're like me in the mess hall watching. What they did was they moved all the tables out and lined up the benches, and we all sat there and watched the screen.
So you spent 4 years in 2 different camps during the war, and after the war ended, you had to leave the camps, but with nothing. And what did you do? Where did you go after that?
Well, as you said, we had nothing. They'd taken everything from us. And just because the war was over didn't mean everybody welcomed us back. My parents decided to go back to Los Angeles. Others decided they didn't want to go back to where they came from. They had bitter feelings about that. And the government gave us a one-way ticket to anywhere in the United States and $25 to start life from nothing. We had absolutely nothing. Our home didn't exist. Our businesses didn't exist. Our cars, everything was gone. Just one-way ticket to anywhere and a $25, which was
Nothing.
nothing,
Yeah.
nothing. And on top of that, the rumor was that it was still dangerous for us to go back to Los Angeles. So my father left first and told us to wait in camp, and he'll first feel out how safe Los Angeles is, and then get a job and a place to stay, and he'll write our mother, and we'll come back to Los Angeles. My father wrote after a 10-week period of suspense, and by that time the camp was almost empty.
Down.
Our mess hall was closed down because most of the people had gone, and we had our meals at our neighboring block, the mess hall, the next block. And when we got the word from our father that he's ready to welcome us back, we packed up, and they said since most of the people were gone, they didn't have the trucks that took people out there. They were going to come by car. And in the evening, the car came, and my mother had packed some of the things that we wanted to take with us. But they said we couldn't take Blackie with us.
Oh.
He was a member of our family. And we said, no, Blackie has to come with us. The soldiers, they were very mean. They didn't have any relationship with us other than ordering us around and pointing their rifles at us. And they said, a dog cannot go. We won't allow that on a train. These were Army trains. And so we had to say goodbye to Blackie. And I still remember looking back through the back window of our car, and Blackie was barking away. He wanted to come with us, and it broke my heart. But that's the last memory I have of Tule Lake.
And then you made your way back to Los Angeles, and I know you've mentioned in the author's note in the back of the book that it was also very hard after because of your heritage of being Japanese American. And but at the beginning of the book, you wrote in your introduction this very thoughtful recounting about how the differences between people shaped your life and experiences, and during the camp in ways that were not great, but also later in life that those differences were also an asset and you found a welcoming community. If there are young people who feel like they don't belong or are treated poorly in their own communities, do you have any advice for them?
Well, we were hated by the rest of America simply because we look like this. We were categorized as enemy aliens. We weren't the enemy, and we weren't aliens. We were born here. We were Americans. I mean, that's how crazy the country was. And they hated us. I couldn't believe that. I had a friend, before we were taken away, who lived a few houses from me, blonde boy who had a giggly laugh, and I enjoyed playing with him. But once we came back, we couldn't move back into our own neighborhood because we had no money to begin with. My father barely had a job. His first job was as a dishwasher in a Chinatown restaurant. Only other Asians would hire us. Other people didn't hire us. And you know what a dishwashing job pays. And more people were coming back from the camps. And my father was no longer a block manager, but people got used to going to him for advice and assistance, and maybe even getting jobs for them. And so my father, here he was working away as a dishwasher, and he was barely getting employed, but he knew these people, and he knew how to find a job. He spoke the language, and some of these people did not speak English well. So what he did was he worked in the morning and lunch business, and then he got a small office in Little Tokyo, the Japanese American community, and he opened up an employment office. He helped other people coming back find jobs. But the kind of jobs that he found for them were jobs like dishwasher, janitor, gardener, which paid a pittance, and his fee would be a small fraction of that pittance. And my mother said, "We have to eat too," and she kept nagging him.
But he created community, and then so does, and other Asian Americans helped you and your family. Do you think that influenced you to be not resentful or look for other people to create community with as you grew older?
Well, when I was a teenager, I became very curious about our imprisonment. I remember the experiences we had, but I didn't understand what that was all about. And so as a teenager, I tried to get information on why we were imprisoned. I went to the library, school library. There was nothing on the imprisonment of Japanese Americans. I went to the public library downtown. I could find nothing. The only source of information was my father. And so after dinner, I had many conversations with him. And he explained to me the racism and the war hysteria that put us in those camps. But he also taught me about democracy, about our system. He said, he quoted often from Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. I'm sure you guys have studied that as well. In the Gettysburg Address, he says, "Our government is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people." He said those are noble ideals. That's what makes our democracy good. But at the same time, that's the weakness of our people's democracy. We are a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And people make mistakes. Even great people make mistakes. And President Roosevelt was a great president when, in the 1930s, the country was in a deep depression. People were unemployed. All the jobs disappeared. People were hungry. People were homeless. They were getting in lines that went out for about a mile for a bowl of soup. That's how hungry they were. The spirit of America was broken, and the president had to get the people galvanized to get that gumption to bring up the economy. And he said to America, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. But after Pearl Harbor,
That's right.
he himself became fearful because we looked just like the people that bombed Pearl Harbor. And even a great president.
Would imprison his American citizens.
Exactly. He got fearful. And he signed the executive order that sent us all into imprisonment. So my father said, if it's a government of the people, we're part of that people too. And we need to participate in people's government. It's a government of the people and by the people, by us. And he said, people have to be engaged. And he encouraged his children, my brother and sister and me, to be active at school. And so at school, when there was a flood in Northern California or a forest fire in Southern California, the Red Cross announced their need for volunteers to make care packages. And so I volunteered for Red Cross service to pack those boxes. And I became the president of the Junior Red Cross at a middle school. And
Some of you are in middle school, so
Yeah, you're
already
in middle
as a young person, you can make a difference.
And I'm sure you have student government, run for student public student government office, be a member of a student council, and participate in school activities. And then when I was a little bit older, my father took me downtown to the Adlai Stevenson for President campaign headquarters. He was running for president, and he was an inspiring speaker. He was the governor of Illinois, and he knew how to talk about how a people's government has to move. It requires people who are passionate and engaged in the ideals of our democracy. And so we volunteered, and it was also a lot of fun working with other people that feel the same way, and we campaigned together. We marched with Adlai Stevenson for President signs, and we had rah-rah events for him, and stuffed envelopes that had campaign literature. And so the fun as well as the importance of being part of our government was taught to me. And I became active in not only political campaigns, but also social justice campaigns. We were imprisoned because of our race and the hysteria of war. And at that time, there was a civil rights movement, and I recognized it was the same thing. African Americans had 400 years of injustice, slavery, Jim Crow, and now the civil rights movement. And I was inspired by Dr. Martin Luther King's oratory. I heard it on the radio, and he was inspiring. And I did a civil rights musical called Fly Blackbird. a musical about student activists campaigning for equality for African Americans. And we were invited to sing at almost every rally, civil rights rally in Southern California. And the biggest of them all was held at the Sports Arena in downtown LA. And the keynote speaker was Dr. Martin Luther King.
And I think that, most students learn about Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement. And so I hope that your picture book will also become part of history lessons for young people, that the Japanese American incarceration is also a really important part of American history about civil rights, and that they're still very relevant today. And so I hope that when you read the book with your parents or with your classmates and siblings, that you do reflect on how things are always related in history. I think that we have some student questions. So I think we have the microphones. Great.
What's your name? Ellie. My name is Ellie. And my question is, was it hard when you had to move to different camps?
Was it hard when you had to move to different camps?
Oh, it's terrible. We were constantly moving from one place to another. That's the part that I hated about being imprisoned. We were first housed in the horse stables of Sanity Racetrack, and then we went by train 2/3 of the way across the country through the hot, dusty desert of Arizona, 3 days and 2 nights of being rocked like that into the swamps, and then we were moved from the swamps back to Northern California, right by the Oregon border, and 3 days and 2 nights again, all the way back, constantly moving, constantly packing and unpacking. It was horrible. And on the train, they had soldiers on both ends of each car and being ordered around by them. It was a horrible, constantly moving, and even in camp, people were agitating and demonstrating, and the jeeps would come roaring in with the soldiers pointing the rifle at you. I hated that part of being imprisoned.
I think we have a question on this side of the auditorium.
Hi, my name's Joanna, and I have a question. Were there any really, really special memories with your dog?
Special memories with your dog, with Blackie?
Oh, special memories with Blackie? Well, Blackie was always hungry. And so we learned how to beg because of Blackie. And when one day when we were coming back from school and he was with us, we passed by the other block's mess hall, and Blackie kept wanting to go to that mess hall. And so we went with Blackie to our neighbor block's mess hall, and he knew exactly where to go, the back of the kitchen. And then he sat and waited for us to do the begging there. Blackie was a very smart dog, and he knew he had control over us. And we had as he ordered us.
Thank you for the question. Over here with the red sweatshirt.
My name's Naomi, and my question is, did you feel like any specific way, or did you feel like something bad was happening when you kept on moving camp to camp?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the last part?
Did you feel any specific way when you kept on moving camp to camp?
Did you feel a specific way when you had to keep moving camps?
A specific way?
Was it always anger?
My parents said we're moving, and we didn't want to be away from our parents, so we moved. We packed. I was into drawing something, and so I gathered all my drawing and put it in a folder and stuck it in my parents' suitcase. But I hated moving because the soldiers were always ordering us around, and like once when we were going back in the middle of a desert, we had to stop, and we didn't know what was going to happen. We thought, somebody said, are they going to shoot us? They're always pointing their guns at us, so we had that scary feeling. But the stop in the middle of the desert was just for us to walk around and exercise a little bit. But it was always uncertain. We didn't know what was happening, where we were going. We knew how long the trip was because they told us, but they didn't tell us where we're going.
And then we're going to go back to this side.
What did you say in Japanese earlier?
What did I say in Japanese?
Oh, with the movie.
Oh, yes. Well, the Lord was saying, there's a strange ship in the bay on my part of Japan. And the samurai said, yes, there is. And the princess said, oh, how scary. You want to hear the princess again?
Oh, hold on 1 second, friends. We have another question over here on this side of the auditorium.
Big, strong
My name
voice.
is Brendan. How good are you at voice acting?
What was that?
What did he say?
How good are you at voice acting?
Oh, how good are you at voice acting?
I do a lot of voice acting. Did any of you see the recent TV series, animated series called The Blue-Eyed Samurai? You saw it?
It's a little bit older.
What?
It's a little bit older than the
Well, yeah, that's true. Well, I did the Lord Seki in that. I love voice acting because I guess my first exposure was in the camp when that man that came with the samurai movie did all that voice acting. So voice acting is something I do a lot of.
I saw you in recently in an episode of Scooby-Doo.
Oh, really?
Yes. You were
I
great
did that
voice
so
actor.
long ago, I've forgotten
But
about
it was immediately I knew who you were because of the voice. Do you have any more questions on this side?
My name is Cameron, and my question is, what were your favorite foods to eat at the mess hall when you were in the camps?
Was there any actually good meals at mess halls? Was there something that you enjoyed eating?
You know, I can't remember enjoying, because part of the ritual of eating in a camp or prison mess hall is to complain. Everybody's complaining, and everybody's trying to one-up the other guy. So somebody might say, this tastes bad, and somebody else would say, this is awful, and somebody else would say, I might vomit. You know, so I don't remember anything good about the food. And the other thing is, I'm Japanese American, but I'm very bad at handling chopsticks because all we had were sort of stew-like food or kind of bowl-type food. And so we had knives and forks and spoons. And my mother she tried to teach me once we were out of camp, but that was too late. I was too grown. And I'm a Japanese American who can't, when I go to sushi bars, I'm always fumbling the sushi and splashing it into the soy sauce. So I use my fingers when I dip my sushi in the soy sauce.
Well, I want to thank you for this time with us, Mr.
I see a lot of hands
I
yet.
know, I'm so sorry, friends. We just don't have enough time today. But clearly they are interested, and I hope that you will read the book. And if you do have questions, that you ask your teachers or even write fan mail to Mr. Takei. So thank you so much for coming today on a slightly dreary Yugi day. And if we can thank Mr. Takei for his time. Thank you so much.